Happy Sunday, beautiful people. Happy Super Bowl Sunday. Happy God's Day, the day of rest Sunday as well, the day of praise.
Happy Soulful Sunday. Happy Spiritual Sunday. Just all the S's.
And hopefully you're feeling good in the activity of your limbs, giving thanks and honor to God, who is the head of our life, who woke us up this morning and started us on our way. So hopefully you're feeling the same way. To God be the glory. We want to welcome y'all back to the R&D show. We're your hosts. I'm Shad.
I'm Ryan.
And you're tuning into the one and only R&D show.
Yeah.
Yes. So I want to come in here and talk about something that's very important. And it's a topic that has really resurfaced because the brothers that are involved in this story were just released after so many years of being in prison. We want to talk about Robert Lil Yummy Sanford. He was a 12-year-old who was executed, who was killed, execution style, in the south side of Chicago back in 1994. It was such a huge story and sent shockwaves all over the nation, so much that his face was on the cover of Time magazine. Wow. That's how big this story was. And not only that, of course, it was a huge story in Chicago where he's from because of his age. You know, he's so young, and then also there were so many dots that were connecting that led up to his lifestyle and some of his choices. And so we kind of want to dig deep into this story and on this topic, because I think it's something that actually still to today hits home with a lot of our children, our young Black boys in general. And so basically, Lil Yummy, Robert, grew up in a household of, I think they may have said somewhere around 40 people in that house. And
what the heck?
There wasn't a lot of guidance and supervision. Life's foundation wasn't laid. And I think sometimes when we know in general, when life's foundation isn't laid as a child, the Bible says you're not responsible and accountable for your actions as far as knowing right from wrong until you're 12. And so leading up to 12, if life's foundation isn't really laid and you have a good sense of right from wrong and choices and consequences, and being in a environment that shows you what it looks like to be a good person, you will become a product of your environment as a child. And so because without life's foundation being laid early on, he had nothing to go off of except for the things that he was taught outside of that household and outside of his mother and his grandmother and his siblings, which is what was going on in the streets. You know, unfortunately, if you don't have an environment that is safe, that is caring, that is loving, that is structured, you will go and find that somewhere else. And
there's a higher probability to go and find it.
Yes, there's a higher probability to go find it somewhere else. And unfortunately, he found it in a street gang called the Black Disciples. And this is a street gang that was in Chicago. So basically, a little bit about young Lil Yummy, Robert. He dropped out of school at 8 years old. Can you imagine dropping out of school to be able to make that type of decision at 8 years old, to not have that guidance and supervision at 8 years old, to make a choice? That's a huge choice. Dropped out of school at 8 years old. By the age of 10, he knew how to drive a car, you know? So he was learning these adult ways, these things that you're not supposed to really be learning at this super because he's so influenced at this age, right? And you're a sponge, so you're soaking in all of these things. And so he's learning this. He also was introduced to drugs at such a young age, and that lifestyle of drug activity, arson, robbery, and then he got his first gun, you know, very young, I think around 10, 11 years old. Got to feel what that feels like at 10, 11 years old. So the Black Disciples, the gang in Chicago, they would recruit children because in their mind, they felt like if we got children to do our work, our dirty work, they can't really get charged. they can get arrested, but they have to release them because they're minors. And I think a lot of that still applies today. A little bit, they've gotten more strict though, right? They've gotten a little bit more strict depending on how severe the crime is. But then it was more so, I thought, and it still is today, that if something like that happens, the parents get in trouble usually. But they will recruit these minors because they felt like if they did the dirty work, they could, throw their rocks and just hide their hands pretty much.
Wow, I did not know that, and it's clever, but it's heinous.
Yeah.
That you would recruit a young person who's not like fully developed, that may not have the foundation, to do the dirty work of adult-minded people that could, severely affect their mental psyche. And affect how they move for the rest of their life. They may not get incarcerated in a traditional prison, but what I believe is they may go to some type of juvenile detention center.
Right.
That just shapes them. It takes them out of the traditional school system, and then to commit such acts at crimes that age can mentally impact you and set you on the wrong trajectory. So that's disappointing to hear. Very disappointing to hear.
And his life is also like a cautionary tale of how broken homes, or homes that don't have, like I said, life's foundation and a strong structure and a parental authoritative figure in that home, can create societal chaos. You know what I mean? Like this child became an agent of chaos, and he was instructed by people that now have become like family to him. A lot of times when these young boys and these young girls go and join gangs, it's because they're seeking that love and attention. They're seeking some type of guidance. They're wanting something, and so he found that within the Black disciples. And it's very interesting because before he even turned 12 years old, so like the last year of his life, right? He was receiving a felony and or misdemeanor every month. And he literally got up to about 23 felonies and misdemeanors.
Wow.
And he had become so cold. He would literally show up in court, and there's probably like a defense attorney or whatever, and they said that he would be just so cold and nonchalant. It was almost scary to be in his presence, because it was as if this baby had no soul. Like this soul was snatched out of his body, and he's just already walking around as a walking corpse already.
As a hardened individual.
Absolutely.
That can't really feel at such an early age. Man, that just hurt. That kind of hurts my soul.
Yeah.
I mean, to know that he didn't really have a chance to really feel love. And then when he did think he was finding love, he found love in the wrong places, and he began to trust these individuals, and they set him on a path towards destruction.
Absolutely. And his mother had so many kids, and I'm not sure if she was or she did or didn't have a drug problem, because in an interview that I watched, she appeared to be okay. It didn't seem as if she was on any drugs, but it seemed like that there was a huge disconnect, as if she spoke of her child as if he was a stranger, as if it was someone else's child, and there was no emotion. There was so much of a disconnect, as if she just did not even know who Robert was. She birthed him, but there was no connection, you could tell. And he probably felt that as a child, which is why, he would have close friends that he felt safe with, and that he had such a good relationship with, that because I have a relationship with them, I can go and stay the night at their house and feel some type of something. Clearly he was looking for something.
I think as Oprah says, everybody wants to be validated, they want to be seen, and they want to be loved. It's just unfortunate that, he found that in the wrong places, and he didn't have that necessarily in his own household, and wasn't what it seems like. I mean, I don't know the story as intimately as you, to get that from his mother, probably his key attachment figure. Yeah.
And it got to a point where his grandmother had to step in. But his grandmother,
That's what happens in a lot of
yeah,
black households. The grandmother comes in and she's a superwoman. She's the savior.
But even with her,
taking...
she had so many responsibilities because it wasn't just him. It was a lot of kids that she was trying to take care of. So it's kind of hard to really give the attention where it's needed when there's so many children who need that attention.
Yeah.
And Yummy needed a lot of attention. He wasn't able to get it. And so he found it, elsewhere. And what ultimately happened with this young man, and he got his name Yummy because he had a love for like sweets. He loved junk food. So that's where he got his nickname, Little Yummy.
So there still must have been some life there.
Exactly.
Right? Some excitement, some innocence there where you're just excited about the simple things, this candy that you're getting, and to have that life, that little bit of life kind of stripped away from you, and it becomes so cold at such an early age.
At such an early age.
When you're just supposed to be just full of life, exploring, curious, warm and loving, to not have that,
And it's great that you made that point because that takes us back to him just being a baby. This is a kid, and kids love their junk food, and that was the kid part of him because in his neighborhood and the people that knew him, they now looked at him as a villain because of him being so cold and his reputation.
I think sometimes as well, you go to the extreme because now you got to live up to that reputation.
Absolutely.
People know me as this type of person, so now I'm going to live up to this type of person. People already painted me as this type of person. Instead of trying to combat that, sometimes we will dive deeper into that, and so that could be part of the thing. Well, you think I'm cold? I'm going to be really cold. I'm going to show you cold.
40 people living in that house, him being, just a baby himself, and going out and making this family with the Black disciples who would recruit these children to do their dirty work. They ultimately, again, put a gun in his hand and told him that he needed to, do a hit. Like, this is your opportunity. We got a task for you. And so he goes, and again, this is a child, and he starts to shoot, and he shoots in a crowd of people, hits a few people, but he hit another baby, another child, Siobhan, who was actually his neighbor, and she was killed. She died. And this is this was the start of the outrage, right? Because you now have a baby that has killed another baby. And it became like a national manhunt. He was all over the news. His face was, and he went on like the run for about 3 days. He ended up back in his neighborhood because he feared for his life. He was fearing for his life, and he felt like there was nowhere safe to be at. And so he went back home, and a neighbor spotted him. He eventually asked that neighbor to call his grandmother, and so that she can come and pick him up so that he can turn himself in, and also so that she can pray for him. So clearly there was something there, right? There was a little bit, there was enough foundation for him to know about prayer and to also now humble himself enough to be like, I did something wrong. And the authorities are looking for me. And so instead of them finding me, I might as well just turn myself in because what I've done is wrong. So even though he showed up in spaces where they felt like he was so cold and heartless, that heart kicked in when he realized I killed another child. And that was not my intention. And so he wanted to turn himself in. When she came back to let him know that she had made the call, he was no longer there. And as he went back on the run, he ran into two boys that he trusted, the Hardaway brothers. They're brothers, they were honor students who were also recruited by the Black Disciples, but they still went to school and they performed well. Unfortunately, these brothers kind of, they convinced him that they were going to help him, escape and get somewhere safe. And they got him into a dark area, had him get on his knees and shot him in his head 2 times, execution style. And of course he died immediately, and those brothers ran off.
Why? I mean, why? What was the motivation? You guys are supposed to be family. You're in the gang together. I wonder what the motivation was behind it.
So the motivation is the Black Disciples now feel as if little Yummy is going to turn against them.
Okay.
He's going to talk. If the police pick him up, they're going to question him enough to where he gives in. He starts giving names.
Yeah.
And I'm not really responsible for this. So in order for them to take the heat off of them, they then ordered these young kids, teenagers, to do more of their dirty work into.
Jesus.
I mean, it's almost like it's an assassination, the way that they did it, right? And to murder him.
And you're saying now these 2 people,
they just got out of jail.
They just got out of jail. So they got tried as adults, and they were in prison for a very long time. But they were under 16, or they were old. I just wonder, I guess maybe there's certain rules or laws in the state of Illinois or the city of Chicago where if you create certain acts that you could be tried as an adult. Because I don't imagine it was tried as a minor and they've been in jail for longer than 15, 20 years, it seems like. When it happened in
This was 30 years ago.
30 years ago, yeah. They had to be tried as an adult.
And sometimes, I remember when I was in my criminal justice classes, some of these kids can be tried as adults, but they can also be tried as kids. And then when they reach 18, then they go to prison. So it's like, we're going to keep you here for this amount of time. But because the crime was so extreme, now you're going to start to serve as an adult eventually. And so there are ways where the system will get you as a child and then come back, and then now as an adult, they'll just break it up. But you still get to serve all of that time if they're giving you all that time.
Okay.
And with them, because the way that they murdered him in execution style, there was no way that they were going to just let them walk free. There was no way that was going to happen.
It was such a big case as well.
It was such a huge case.
Yeah. So they also had to be an example.
Set an example, absolutely.
But they set an example. But we've seen how the crime in Chicago has continued to be sky high, and you continue to see young kids killing other young kids. You still see stray bullets from young kids hitting other people. So it seems like it's just continued, and it hasn't alleviated. It hasn't gotten that much better. I don't know the specific statistics, but just like from the attention that the media gives to it, it makes it seem as if it's gotten worse or been around the same.
I think what I find interesting is 3 days before his murder, of course, he accidentally, killed Siobhan. Her story and the light that was supposed to be surrounding her story was completely dimmed and turned off because now this happened to her killer. And it's an even bigger story because you have a 12-year-old boy who has now been murdered. And where was the village? Where were the parents? Where was the community? And now, mind you, this community showed up to his funeral. There was 400 people that showed up to his funeral. His funeral was an open casket funeral. And in the video, you can see these children touching on his body. You can see them touching on this. And you can see all of these things, all of these words being said. And it's almost as if now we have so much to say. Now we want to show up in a certain way. But this baby needed all of that love way before that. You know what I mean? And I think also that was why there was such a disconnect when the funeral was going on and, the reporters were talking to his mother and she just had nothing, like there was no connection. There was again, as if it was a stranger that she was burying. and
Mm-hmm.
she really didn't have much words to say because she did not know her son.
Wow. I wonder, did she distance herself from her son, like as he began to go down the wrong path? Because she kind of maybe felt what was going to happen to him, so she had to have some level of detachment. Or was that level of detachment from, from birth, and that he never really got that love, or did she detach later? And it's interesting that you talk about the concept of a village, and you have all these people that came to the funeral, and where were they prior to the funeral? Was it that they were just so caught up in their own lives and they said this kid is somebody else's responsibility? I know my parents talking about where they grew up. They grew up in mostly black neighborhoods in different cities in North Carolina. My mom in Newton Conover, North Carolina, my dad in Gastonia, North Carolina. But this was, where there were strong pockets of black communities where educated black people also lived with maybe educated black people that are not educated, where high income black people, middle income black people lived in the same neighborhoods as lower income black people, and we all helped each other out and took care of each other. And there was more of a village concept. I even think when I was growing up, we had more of a village. Man, my kindergarten teacher, second grade teacher, third grade teacher, they knew my grandmother. I mean, I would get paddlings. My grandmother would come up, same thing, they knew my mom and dad, and it really was a village that raised me. The people at the Boys and Girls Club knew my family, and so they took an interest. So I wonder, like, in this community, maybe in this community where everyone was struggling, and in the South, I imagine it might be in the South side of Chicago where there's a lot of poverty, and everybody's just trying to find their way out. And since they're just trying to find and they're struggling to survive, they don't have the space to really, care for another one. Or there's maybe just only a few individuals. Maybe it's those few grandmothers, those few strong black men that's trying to take care of the community, and they can't do it all by themselves. So sometimes these kids get lost because there's not enough of us in those spaces to really care for those type of kids that get lost.
Absolutely. And I want to make a correction that he was actually 11 and not 12. So, and that correction is needed because it goes to show that still he had no idea what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
So he did not have a choice in what was going on in his life. He really did not have a choice in his actions. He was told to do something, and so he did what he was told to do. I could not imagine being 11 years old, being in that type of environment and being faced with those adult challenges and situations, making those hard decisions as an 11-year-old, but it's not even a decision of yours, so it's not hard. It probably comes easy because someone's telling you to do these things. Someone that you trust is telling you to do these things, and you just go and do it. So him not even making it to see 12 years old and all of these things happening between the ages of 8 and 11, that's a short period of time for you to just spiral completely out of control based off of the environment that you're exposed to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, you're still a baby. You're still a baby, and you haven't been given that foundation. And you slip through the cracks. And in slipping through the cracks, you're finding love in the cracks, in the dark places where you think these people care about you, and
they don't care.
And they don't.
And we have 4 children. You have Siobhan, you have Robert Lil Yummy, and you have the 2 teenage brothers who really lost their lives, right? They all really lost their lives. In the story, and the impact of this story is greater than just Little Yummy. Because now these boys are now probably in their 40s, 50s, somewhere around there. You've lost a span of your life. You've lost so much life. And you have Siobhan, whose life stopped completely, and also Lil Yummy. And I feel like the impact was so great. And that same month when he appeared, the same month of his death, he appeared on Time Magazine, his face, because it's an impact it literally sent shockwaves to shake the world up, to shake us all up as parents, to shake everyone up, these children as well, to let everybody know that this can happen. this is not only happening, but this can happen in your area. This can happen to your child. This can happen to your friends. This is bigger than just Chicago.
Yeah, but the issue with that is we should continue to highlight those type of things, but the outrage lasts for a moment.
That's true.
You know, and then once a few days, a few weeks pass by, then we go back to doing what we were doing before. We're not working to change the system. We're not working to create better environments for our young people. We get pissed off, we get upset. These days, we post a few tweets, we get on social media, say our piece, but we don't continue to do the work. We don't vote. We don't mentor young people. We don't invest in the community the way we should. But we just have more work to do.
There's so much work to do.
So much more work to do.
And when I think of Lil Yummy and his story and how his life was cut short, I think of my brother, who was also shot in the head he was 18 years old, getting ready to graduate from high school, attended a party and was leaving that party with friends. Another young man walks up, starts shooting randomly, and the boys, they duck because they get to the car, but they duck by the car. They all get up and start running. My brother starts running too, and I realize he got been hit in his head. And as he's running, he finally falls to the ground, and the other boys come over and realize that he's been hit, that he's bleeding, and he makes it to the hospital. And I just remember the nurse. I remember the nurse telling me like how strong he was. Like he kept getting up off the table. That's how strong he was. She was like, I couldn't imagine. She was like, I couldn't, as she was working, she just kept saying, I wasn't understanding how this young man has a bullet hole in his head and he's that strong to kind of fight all of us off as he's trying to get off the table. So he was, he laid in a coma for a while, and I just remember being at the hospital and holding his hand and talking to him and really spending that time with him, thinking that he's gonna wake up, and I felt like he was gonna wake up. I felt like he was responding to me. He hadn't responded to anyone else, because as I spoke life into him and I spoke to him, there was a tear that fell from his eyes, and I was just like, he's gonna be okay. I know he's gonna be okay. He's gonna wake up out of this thing. And of course he ended up not waking up out of it, because he was declared brain dead. And once that happens, that's pretty much it with your life. Either they can live life as a vegetable, or you just pull the plug. And so there was a decision to be made, and I just remember how difficult that was for me. That was difficult to go through that process of seeing him from a hospital bed to a casket, and just knowing that this is it. Life stops here, at 18 years old, and there won't be a time to see him have children, get married, or what his life would have been like, life after high school. It was cut short and it was taken away. And the correlation to both of those stories is the community showed up. His funeral was huge. So many teenagers, so many kids, so many people were impacted by this story and what happened to him, that they packed out one of the biggest churches, and it literally just changed the lives of so many people, so many kids. The same as Lil Yummy, all these children showing up to his funeral and being touched in some type of way, not really understanding what's really going on, but just knowing that there's a body laying here that's no longer breathing, that's no longer warm, that's no longer moving, and this is what death looks like. And unfortunately, sometimes, depending on the situation and circumstance, some people have to see that to get a wake-up call. And I think that Lil Yummy's death and the way that they broadcast his funeral and his face on time was a wake-up call for a lot of families, for a lot of children. Like, this can be me. How do we make a difference in the community? How do we make a difference in our family? How do we make a difference with our children? How do we show up Because it's one thing to give birth or to bring a child into this world, but it's another thing to be fully present for that child and to actually raise that child and not just be roommates with that child or know of that child. But there's an experience, there's an actual connection, there's a bond, you're actually being a full-time parent in that child's life. And God gives us children as gifts, and what we do with that gift is up to us. But we're supposed to give that gift back to God. That's one thing we're supposed to do. But then also protect and cover and honor and take care of that gift. And I know sometimes it can be a little difficult depending on how many children you have, but these are decisions and actions that you're making as an adult. You have a responsibility to do your part. And Lil Yummy, he didn't get that. Unfortunately, it was taken away from him. And so he tried to go find it where it made his life even worse. And he could have been living a life that he thought was not the best, but his life became even worse. And so this story is just, it's so heartfelt, it's touching, and it's a story that I think a lot of young people should listen to, should know about, because this happened in 1994. You think about it being 2024 and how we've seen so many children still murdered and killed by children. So how that shows you how much has and has not changed. These babies are still very much so influenced, or these boys get a certain age and they develop these friendships with these other boys who want to be hard and want to be in gangs and want this type of lifestyle, not really knowing what it all entails until it's too late, until they're in too deep. Even if it's an association, you can be associated with a gang. There can be an affiliation with a gang, and just by your affiliation of just being associated with them, you're a part of that problem now. Somebody else is going to see you, and even if you're not repping fully, the other gang, the rival gang, is still going to look at you as part of them, and they're going to do whatever they have to do to make whoever's life miserable. And this baby was murdered by his own people. That goes to show you that the gangs don't love nobody. That life doesn't love anyone. I mean, if your own gang, the people that you felt safe and protected by, the people that you felt like, now this is life, this is people that care about me, this is people that love me, this is who's guiding me, could have the heart to even murder you, then what do you think somebody else on the outside is going to do? You know what I mean? So this is such a huge wake-up call to understand that we've got to make sure that we're present, and there's a village that is surrounding and protecting our children in such the most beautiful, healthy, spiritual way, because they need that. These kids they're so easily influenced, but they need somebody to just speak life into them and to stay. But sometimes it takes more than just one person. Sometimes it takes more than a mom and a dad. There's uncles and aunties and neighbors and a community of people and school teachers and pastors and mentors. There's so many people that can be involved in this village of helping children not necessarily be a product of an environment if that environment is toxic, if it's unhealthy, if it's dark, if it's destructive.
Yeah, it definitely takes a village, and it seems like Lil Yummy, as I said before, slipped through the cracks. It's up to us to do our part, even if it's just your niece, nephew, somebody close. You don't have to save the world. If we all try to pour into one person, we can make a difference.
We can definitely make a difference. And one thing about my brother's death is not only did I become even more of an advocate, but it made a difference. This is the one funeral that I went to where I seen so many young boys who may have came in there with their, their bandanas, or whatever the case may be. They thought that they were hard. They put them down in baskets. You know, they cried, they got prayed for, and a lot of them started to change their life.
They say death is not for the dead, but for the living.
Absolutely. And I always tell people, you know, we look at death, like you just said, as just death, that's it. But there's so much life in death. If you look at it as somebody's life was taken away sometimes to help save and change my life. How do I make this life count? I make this life count by doing something amazing with mine, by being a better person, by not going down the same road that they went down, by using that life as an example to help and change other people's lives as well. And that's always been my goal and my mission, is to never let my brother's name be in vain or his light to go out, because I want to be an advocate to make sure that I'm helping young, old, it doesn't matter who you are, individuals recognize and realize their worth, their value, why they're important, and why they deserve to live. Why they deserve to live a good life that isn't promised to any of us, because no man knows the day nor the hour that anything can happen to any of us. But as long as you're living a good life, that's what's going to be memorable. Those are the footprints that you leave. That's the legacy that you leave. That's what people are going to talk about. And so I've made it my business to always be that vessel that God uses to touch and to help other people. And that doesn't make any of us perfect or think that we know it all, but we're just being a vessel and doing the work of God, whatever that gift is that he's giving us. And so that's what this video is about. It's about shining light on a young man who ultimately was used as a vessel to spread a message that we've got to do better, that these children need us, that we have to show up in some type of way to be a village that's supportive, and that we just cannot give up. I know sometimes it gets hard, but these babies that aren't even 12 years old are just babies. And there's still time to redirect them and feed their brains something that's positive. And this story just, all of it just makes me a little emotional, because, you know, I want our Black boys to just succeed. I want them to live a good life and not to have to struggle or suffer or not have a life at all. And so I do my part and I do my best to just do what I can, and that's all that we can do, you know, especially our young boys.
Yeah, that's all we can do. You got to be the change that you wish to see. And if you want these young boys' lives to improve, you know, we got to do the work.
We have to do the work.
Faith without work is dead, what we said in our last video. So we have to do the work. We got to continue to feed into them.
Absolutely.
As people have fed into us. There's been so many amazing Black men, from Vernon Perry, who's executive director of the Boys and Girls Club, Mr. Potlow, you know, Mr. Perkins. I had school teachers, I had basketball coaches that all fed into making me the man I am today. So it was up for us to continue to repay it back.
Each one teach one. We all have the capability to do something, to make a change, and to be the difference that we want to see. And that's what the R&D show is about, is being the change that we want to see as Black men. We want to help be the change that we want to see, that we speak so much about in today's society and in this world, and that we complain about. Each one teach one, and that's what we're doing. And so hopefully this video resonated with you some type of way, and you learned something new if you didn't know already, and it touched your heart, and you feel compelled to share this video, to like this video, to comment, because we want to start the conversation. At the end of the day, we all we got, beautiful Black people. Mm-hmm. And we shouldn't destroy each other. We're all we got. So let's find ways to love on each other, support each other, and to help be a part of a village that these children need.
That's that on that.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the R&D show. God bless you. Until next time, take care of yourself and each other.
Amen.
Peace.